We stand here tonight is a very special evening, and the amount of people here in the room is a testament to show how really special it truly is. We find ourselves in Parshas Tetzaveh. And I'd like just to make a little connection before we begin the program. I found it quite interesting. The last mimer that the Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke, actually didn't speak, but he checked over and handed out, was the mimer Va'ata Tetzaveh. And in that mimer, the Lubavitcher Rebbe basically laid out the connection between a chassid and a Rebbe. And tonight marks the Shloshim. This morning, we had the Akamas HaMatzeva from my dear mother-in-law. And she was somebody who truly was a chassid of the Rebbe. Somebody who truly had a connection with the Rebbe. She was a Balas Tshuva. She wasn't brought up religious. But yet from the moment she understood and learned about the importance of leading a religious life, she took every step of her life very seriously. She was 110% dedicated to every single thing she did. And the fact that it falls out, that tonight the Shloshim falls out on the week that we read Va'ata Tetzaveh, is not just by happenstance. It's Hashgacha Pratis, it's divine providence. And I think it very much shows on somebody who is very much dedicated to her shlichus, to her mission of being an emissary of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I just want to share with you a little story. My father-in-law said this over by the Shiva, that my in-laws were on shlichus originally in Buffalo, New York, and after 2 years of shlichus there, they were ready to move on, and the opportunity of shlichus came up here in England. Now, my mother-in-law is originally from Chicago, but her parents found the light and moved to California. And there was ideas of maybe possibly going to California, but my father-in-law found that the most suitable place was going to be here in England. And he was trying to speak to my mother-in-law to try to get her, to come to England. So he asked her, so knew what's going to be. And he gave her some time to think about it. And she came back with the answer, I'll give it 10 years. When it came to shlichus, when it came to dedicating herself to the community, it didn't cross her mind whether she was going to do it or not. The question was how. And that's one point I think we can all take out of tonight to start with, is how dedicated one must be in life in general. We have to be full-hearted into something. I'm speaking to myself here, and we have to dedicate ourselves completely. And if we dedicate ourselves completely, we can be successful. However much work we put in is how much fruit we get out of the work we put in. We are lucky to not have just a beautiful community, but to have a beautiful family. And there's my father-in-law has a dear brother who for 30 years was the brother-in-law to my mother-in-law, and he has a lot of words of wisdom to share with us. I'd like to ask him to come share with us a few words from the heart that he'll share with us tonight about my mother-in-law, Michael Overlander.
First of all, I'm not sure that there'll be too many words of wisdom, but they will all be words from the heart. And I should start by saying that unfortunately our parents are not able to be with us because they are in Florida, and unfortunately probably are not too well enough to travel, but they send their love to all the family, and hopefully they'll be back in London soon to see you all personally. So as you may be able to detect, I'm sort of the black sheep of the Overlander clan, but not one of the black hats. I have a relatively simplistic perspective on life, and also have been known to be a little light-hearted and have a sense of humour that some may find amusing. But perhaps that's why I could so easily click with my sister-in-law. I first met Sara Leah about 30 years ago on a rather hot day somewhere on Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn. She was circling my brother Gershon under the chuppah at the time. To me, this was a little strange. Not the circling, I get that part, but to be honest, I was far more ignorant then of the ways of Lubavitch than perhaps I am today. Did it matter that this was the first time? No, not really, as we were family, or soon to become family, and if my brother was happy, then so was I. I'd never been to any form of Lubavitch events before, and this was my first wedding that I had, me and my wife and my son had ever attended. Ben spent most of the evening on my shoulders dancing, and for him, he still has memories of that very special occasion. Since then, I was present at their eldest son's monash's Brit Milah in New York, heard and later met Reuven and his somewhat unexpected and speedy arrival in an ambulance, was present in Manchester when the Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs gave a glowing tribute to the Rabbi and the Rebbetzin. I've apparently filmed somewhat graphic details of Yossi's Brits in London, and I've seen Esther and her ever so special Mendel be married and now with 2 children of their own. Chaya Mushka is always a warm and loving young lady and enjoys friendships with her cousins, my children. I've teased Menachem when he was young and watched Hannah grow into an amazingly capable young woman and a super supportive sister and daughter. Miriam often surprises me that she not only is, because she is 15, but has the artistry skills of someone far older. Shalom Bear is forever showing me something new, even though he's hiding at this moment. And Bracha has always got a head in a book. Why do I mention all of these things? Primarily because I see this evening is not only to remember Sara Leah, but to remind us all of the things that were of the utmost importance to her family. Over the years, the direction of our 2 families have taken quite different and separate paths. And Gershon, you and I have had many lively conversations and debates in the past on a host of matters. But when we all got together, there was always a great feeling of solid foundations that helped us enjoy each other's company. And one of the main cornerstones in ensuring the family's cohesion was Sara Leah. Her personality, her sense of humour, these were always present, and her perception in saying the right thing at the right time never escaped her. Juliet, that's my missus, and we would often remark to each other as to the way in which the children behaved and their amazing respect for their parents. Sara Leah would just have to give them a knowing little look, or simply mention their name with a special tone. And surprisingly, they would stop arguing with each other, do their homework, or lay the table. This natural derech eretz is an inherent part of the warmth and love that makes up the family in Horswell Road. And it truly is a tribute to Sara Leah's unique qualities as a wife and a mother. I've already referred to her sense of humour, which is something that she was certainly not short of. Many times, Sara Leah would come up with a one-liner that would bring a smile to all our faces. I know that some of you may have heard this little story, but I'm going to repeat it because so many of my and my wife's friends who possibly had only met her on one or two occasions, on learning of the sad news, immediately recalled this wonderful moment. It was my 50th birthday party at home, and Juliet and my daughter Jessica were both putting on a small show in front of all of our friends. Jessica had dressed up like a ballerina and was wearing a very attractive silver wig, which kept slipping off her head. Sara Leah, seeing Jessica's predicament, pushed her way to the front and proudly and loudly declared, "Let me help, I've got years of experience with these things," and promptly straightened out the wig and clipped it perfectly. She did bring the house down. The last 2 years have not been easy for any of us who knew and loved Sara Leah. The children and their spouses have truly been wonderful and supportive, and have been truly supportive and wonderful to their mother, and their united love for each other has made this journey just that little bit easier. My brother has been a dedicated and wonderful husband, spending several months at Sara Leah's side while she was in hospital, playing the guitar and singing songs to other patients, and bringing a source of inspiration to the nursing staff who were truly affected by the sad events some 30 days ago. Towards the end, I got talking to a man in the hospital. He was there with his wife. She too was having treatment, and I think she had been in the hospital for about 6 months. He was a Muslim from somewhere in the Middle East. Judaism was pretty alien to him, and he knew little of our customs and traditions. But he only had wonderful things to say about Sara Leah and the Overlanders. He told me that other people in the ward who had come in contact with Sara Leah all felt the same. He hoped that her memory would live in our hearts, and I assured him that it will. My daughter Jessica was so inspired by Sara Leah, who despite her illness still managed to occasionally make challahs, that she has now started to make them on her own with her 4-year-old daughter as her helper. So not only will we always have a sweet reminder of Sara Leah every Shabbat dinner, but even those who may be too young to understand what has happened will know and be reminded of her in a unique and special way. So in conclusion, may I borrow a few English words from the words of El Malay Rachamim. May her place be in the Gan Eden. May all the merciful ones shelter her forever and bind her soul in the bond of life. The Lord is her heritage. May she rest in her resting place in peace. Amen.
Thank you, Michael. It's not an evening to say thank you, but I do have to say thank you to Michael and Juliet for all the support and help they have given my in-laws throughout the years, and especially during this very challenging time. Thank you, Michael. I mentioned before about how my mother-in-law, when she did something, she did it 100%. Over the 2 years that my mother-in-law unfortunately was diagnosed with Yana Machla, she did to her literally her best ability to keep every single halacha and hidur that she kept through all the years that she was religious. Around the week before she passed away, she was extremely weak. hardly able, it was very, very hard for her to talk. Every time she had to speak, she had to muster up strength to be able to ask for a cup of water. Whatever it was, she barely had any strength. And she asked my father-in-law to get her a siddur, and she wanted to daven. She went from the beginning of davening until Shemana Esrei. It took her an hour and a half. On a good day, I wish I could daven for half of that. And my mother-in-law mustered up the strength to be able to daven like that. It's something that we all have to take in mind, to appreciate every day that we have, to appreciate every moment that we have, to be able to focus on the moment, be able to put ourselves 100% in the moment. Not think about football scores, business, children, family. Those are all important things, but there's a time and place for everything. And when you find yourself somewhere, be there 100%. And if there's one thing that my mother-in-law was 100% wherever she was. There are many people here in the room, I'm sure, have a lot to share with us. We don't have a whole night. There's somebody here in the room who has been a help to my in-laws since they started the Chabad in Hendon, and has been a help all along since. He knows my in-laws for a number of years. I'd like to ask Rabbi Yunik to come share with us some words of inspiration.
I stand here today not only as a colleague of Rav Gershon, together with my colleagues of Lubavitch here and other Rabbonim, Shloshim, and I stand there also as a friend, somebody whose life was touched and affected by the Overlanders in a very big way. This morning, as we stood at the Akamas Matseva and the stone setting, and we were listening to the words, looking at the words that were describing the life of Rebbetzin Sara Leah, everything that is being said about her is 100% correct and true. Her life, her values, her commitment, her love, her dedication, as a wife, as a mother, as a grandmother, and the love that she extended to her extended family, to the many young people and from various different ages who are affected and touched by her and Rav Gershon in the Chabad House. Hendon Chabad House is known to many as Chabad Live. And I thought to myself, these two words, Chabad Live, really focus what this evening is all about and what Rebbetzin Sara Leah's life meant to so many. Chabad is all about living Yiddishkeit, living Chassidus, internalizing and allowing Chassidus to penetrate every aspect of our life. That's what Chabad is. Chachma Bina Das. What is live? Live is the way we impact others with our Chabad, with our Yiddishkeit, with our Chassidishkeit, with our Menschlichkeit. And when one looks kind of at the Overlander children, those that are here, and those that are studying away, those that couldn't be here, one could see a certain level of Edelkeit, of Menschlichkeit, in the way the children were educated, the way they interacted with others. Something kind of very, very special. Today is Zayin Adar, it's the 7th of Adar, which is the yahrzeit and the birthday of Moshe Rabbeinu. As well, we read today the parashas V'ata Tetzava, as we just heard before. Now we know that this is the only Torah portion that does not mention the name of Moshe Rabbeinu, basically since his birth. Week after week, over the last few weeks and the next couple of weeks, Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned in the Torah. Sorry? He says it's not mentioned in the Haggadah either. We know that because of the passing of Moshe Rabbeinu, his name is not mentioned in the Parsha, and he also told Hashem, "Mecheni no mesiflecha," take me out of your Torah. But nevertheless, the Rebbe comes forth, and Chassidus says that even though Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned in the Parsha, when the Torah says, "V'ata titzava," you shall command, every word in the Parsha is talking about Moshe Rabbeinu. You, the essence of Moshe Rabbeinu, is talking and commanding each and every one of us. As we're standing here at the Shloshim, in the Beis Chabad here in Hendon, one could say, "V'ata titzava." The neshama of Rebbetzin Sara Leah is felt here, lives here, in a very, very big way. Not only was the Chabad House, their Chabad House, but their own home carried a minyan for many years. I remember Rav Gershon telling me how the rug kind of had hundreds of people through all weathers going through the carpet, and they kept that very same carpet. Who wants to change a carpet which had so many olenus, so many tefillas on it? As we heard this morning from Rabbi Aryeh Safran at the Akamas Matseva, how he remembers when the Chabad House was established here in Hendon, together with Rav Gershon, Yibodel L'chaim Tovim, the Rebbetzin she was always in the kitchen, moving this wall, that wall. She was an integral part of the Chabad House in a very, very big way. When her mother passed away, somebody came to comfort her, and she turned to that individual and she said, that's what's happening now. She was sitting Shiva for the loss of her mother. She said, what was happening now is not bad, it's sad. She had a very positive approach to life. Even the various different difficulties and challenges that were thrown her way, she persevered. She did everything, as we heard before, 100%. And she had the ability to be able to take a challenging situation, when at times things looked difficult and less focused, her emunah and her bitachon, and she persevered with Hashem's help to be able to transform a situation and take it forward in the best possible way. She was a real chassid of the Rebbe. She had a certain love for limud ha-chassidus, for the teachings of Chassidus, especially for Tanya, and Darkei Chassidus, for the ways of Chassidus. I remember through, like many others here, would pop into the Overlander's house from time to time to sit, to schmooze, to talk, to be encouraged, to share a few words. And the Rebbetzin Overlander particularly, she loved to hear stories about the Rebbe, about the Rebbetzin, about Chassidim, about Lubavitch. She had so many different questions. And you could see that she's really talking about the Rebbe and Shlichus and everything else, because she was trying to implant in her children the same love and experience that she had. And she was doing that verbally. When she heard the story of the Rebbe, she would live that experience that she was hearing at that very moment. And that's what living B'limud B'darkei Chassidus is all about. I remember one particular story, was sitting at the I think it was actually Pesach. Came to the house, after Pesach, we were sitting around the table, and I shared with her the story that I heard from Rabbi Nachman Meir Bernard, Rabbi Norman Bernard, as angesund. Now he was a young Bnei Akiva rabbi, who fast forward to Rabbi Mendel Lipsker, he eventually became close to Lubavitch, and he came to see the Rebbe in New York. And at that time he had a 12-year-old daughter, and their dream was always to move to Eretz Yisrael, to, after a number of years in Johannesburg, that would be the next stage in life. He became a chassid, the gartel, the beard, the kapata. And one day he wrote to the Rebbe and he said that because he became a Lubavitch, and he wasn't born Lubavitch, he didn't maybe feel, these are my words, as special or as one that was sitting in the front row. That's what he expressed himself when he wrote to the Rebbe. So the Rebbe responded by saying that Yodua, Roiv Chasidei Admir Hazaken, Hoyu Gevorene V'loi Geborene V'Yodua Malosam. The Rebbe said, we know that most of the outer Rebbe's Hasidim, they became Lubavitches. And we know how great they were. The Rebbe told them there's nothing to worry. Rebbetzin Overlander and Rav Gershon, from the moment that they encountered the Rebbe, Chassidus, Lubavitch. They knew that to be a Chassid, that to be Shluchim, is 100% dedication without compromise. To live a life of Yiddishkeit and Chassidishkeit and to be real role models. And we all know that we're living in a day and age where one is pulled in so many different directions. And it's very easy to let go and think the grass is greener elsewhere. But their commitment was so strong. It was 100% commitment. It reminds me of the story that the great Chassid, Rab Nissen Nemenov, he was the Mashpia in Brinois many years ago, in my father's days. And once when he was in Yechidus by the Rebbe, he was talking about instituting a certain project in the yeshiva. So the Rebbe told Rab Nissen that before he comes out with any mitzvah, with any project, he asks himself, will I be at least 50% successful? And if I will be, I will go with it. That's what the Rebbe told Rab Nissen. The Overlander's commitment to every mitzvah of the Rebbe, to reach out to Jews in an unconditional way. The detail of Yiddishkeit was 100% commitment without any change. And that is something very, very special, to be able to look at oneself and say, you know what, I'm dedicated to my cause, to what I believe in, and nothing will ever cause me to compromise what life is all about. To conclude, we all know the words that the Rebbe spoke about time and time again at the passing of the Rebbetzin, quoting from Shlomo HaMelech, "V'hachai yitin aliboy," and the living have to take to heart. It's here, b'mokim kadosh zeh, in this Chabad house, and through this Chabad house, that Baruch Hashem, the lives of many hundreds and thousands, and through the various different shlichusim that you had before, were affected and transformed and changed. And Be'achai Yitin Aliboy, her dear husband Abgeshin, her wonderful, beautiful children, and all of us that were affected by her, have to take a moment and to stop and to reflect and ask ourselves, what could we do to make sure that her neshama lives on? We heard before from Rav Mendel so many touching and moving things about her life, about her commitment, about her shlichus. Who's going to fill her void? Yes, Rav Gershon and his children, but we could all be a partner by us doing our bit to make sure that our level of Yiras Shamayim, our commitment, our Hidur Mitzvah, the way she davened, the way she had time to learn Chavrusa with other people, that's what it's all about. We're not asking anybody to build big buildings and do massive things. We got to connect to the values that she had and make that change in our own life. And that will do it. And finally, we just read in the parasha about the Mishkan. The Mishkan spoke about the Keruvim. The Keruvim were baby-faced statues or images. And when one thinks about that, what's a child? A child always has the ability to recreate themselves. They fall, they trip, they made a mistake, they lost focus, they get up and they start again and they move on. The Rebbetzin had a certain youthfulness in everything that she did, starting from her smile, her dedication. When he met her, when he spoke to her, when she ran from one person to the other, when she was like a mother or mashpia to many, she was youthful, she was young. She was able to give others the ability, even though that they felt old in spirit, to find the youthfulness within themselves and to be able to reach great heights. May Sara Leah be a Melis Yosher, a good Tibeta for Abgershin, the children and the grandchildren, and Amit Hashem shall have many, many more simchis. And I'm sure that she'll have tremendous amount of nechamer from all the wonderful polos that will take place here in this Chabad house, and through our involvement and our partnership to see to it that V'hachai Yitna Liboy, that her neshama lives on.
If I can just ask everyone to be patient for one moment, we have a very special video of the Rebbe we're going to play.
From a talk by the Rebbe on the yahrzeit of his mother, Rebbetzin Sara Leah. First, in a three-part series.
Die Svadus sind verbunden mit der Yahrzeit von Alisha bei Israel, ist das Lecheble Reich darf der Fun sein, Aero, Bepeil, mit die Unionen, welche Alisha ist eingeteilt, legabe Anoshi. Der Oplen, die noch leichter, ich habe das Rätsel von Minien, geworden mit Noshi, aber beätzen ist Adar Achiv al Piateru ist Adar Seichel, was war Vechulu, die Doshove bis Chorim Ubinekei. Und das ist auch die drei Mitzvahs, in welchen Ashleisha Amudi, was allein Beis Yisrael Emet. Und das ist der Linie von Taras Amishachis Achim und Shtier. Und der Linie von Adnochas Leilit Shabbos Yom Tov, was al Pi HaTeiro, mitzad HaTeiro, in Doshove bis Chorim Ubinekei. Die alle drei. Apel Pikein auf Teira allein angepasst mit dem Teirischen Balfer. Und sie geworden nach Haloch in Shulchan Aruch. Das Emestaki, beide seine Mechuyel, beschoven in alle drei Sachen. Die Zeit aber, wo der Ruth ist, war Isha Metsuya Bebeisa. Und Nenir, Ogiger in der Mitte von Adnokes, Leili Shabbos wie Yom Tov, der sehr gebaut Achit im Käse ist, wie Chit in der Mansbu. Et nun Chit im Käse ist, nur davon kommen zu Ezer Kinegde. Und nun auch wieder in der Linie von Kashes Achim und Stier zu früher, weil der sehr der Linie von Taras Amishpach, was beide seine Mechuje mit demselben Schar, weil man hat sich schon nicht bei der Woche und wenn man hängt dort, also sei der Dier-Bedauer und die Schmiede-Bedauer und der Kiel-Befehl hängt das so von der Isha. Wie Atke de Kach, als da kommt in der Amermonis Miuchedes, wo die Scharchelke Atero sagt mir nie bis an ei Dechert kommt sein Nehmen in Asen in Joni und da verlost mir sich auf an ein und einzige Flug, wenn ich gehe zu der alle drei in Joni. Wo der Funi verstande, als der in der Rüse ist noch leichter aufzulernen, Adur was missmachlich, aber soll mäßig sein, der Bedir, Kuschnila und die alle drei in Joni, was der Peil wird es sage durchgeführt, al Pischuchen Norlach, al Piateira, wird es durchgeführt, al den Noshim und Mesis Roen, ist noch leichter ablernen davon und nehmen Keach und Nesimas Keach und Nidu, davon was mir sagt, ad die Noshim und Bonis, seine Mesis, der Chol Schleches in Yonim Eibel, Eilba Negel, der Anoshim und Bonis, in die Unionen Ashayochim lehen beyichud, oder in die Unionen am Shutofim, bekam Mokim lehaski, als es der Dovos mit der Cheshech Agolus, ist eine Mehape Cheshech legei, und Cheshech, ist wann das Reis gekommen, a Bilbo, was im ganzen Hepert von Sechel Ayosher und Hepert von Emes, as כאילו, as al pi Teiro, i do a ich-Shivi nicht Gleichkeit zwischen Männer und Frauen, Jatke die Kach am Atum gestellt, a ganze Bewegung, dass es bleibt befreien die Frauen. Und was so genommen ist, als ein Indianer, was sie seinen Hepech hat Teiro, wie Yusef Keva Jocho, a die bald, dass sie darf sein, aber sie freuen. Und sie darf sein Archivien zwischen jeder Menschen, was jeder Mensch in Nivra bezahlen Rekie. Wenn wir Tormen nicht onrieren den Covid von Noshim, dann gab es den Covid von Anoshim. Was Teira das bewohnt und hat gesagt, alle Yilbar Geber Sila Sisha. Und dieselbe Sache Aisha, Tor nicht ontomt in Silas Geber. Worin jeder hat sich sein Gräse Stand und sein Gräse Schlichus in Inyoni Roelo, Allahs kam in Inyoni Atero, Der Rebbe hat das Eike wehgewehrt und hat gesagt, dass die Schleimus und der Herrste der Griechen von der Gewehre sei, nicht wenn es noch machen, als Simlas Ischo, Anton als Simlas Ischo, weil der sehr bei der Gehe Noschen, als sehr größte Schleimus ist, wenn sie dann sein Noschen, wie Noschen Daten sein, nicht noch leben. Und zugucken sagt, weil sie viele sich nennen, als sie dachten, sie berechen, als sie viel. Was kommt, die größte Gefallenkeit, die größte Herde, die Makoras Erech Atzmi, was sie kann sein bei einem Menschen, in dem Jokter und hat Milchome gefahren, aber wir sollen zulassen, soll können noch machen als zweiten Menschen. Wo das gefühlt wird, Koomura hat gemacht von Cheshech und von Cheshech, und das, was Torah hat gegeben früher, die größte Sache, was sie kann sein. Wo die größte Sache, was sie da bei Geikodisch und bei der Gehe zu Torah, Ziva, Lohn und Meshe, erfunden dort, was sie gelernt am Matten Torah, soll zukommen Adar, was wird gehen in dieselbe Welt. Und danach von dem zweiten Dor zukommen dritte Dor, was sie tun ist. Was sie kann sein Adar, bejachlich den Deel, was sie gestanden beim Matten Teiro, muss man noch kommen zu früh.
For those of you who were following what the Rebbe spoke about the role of a woman as a wife, as the Keres Abayis, the one that runs the home. And I'd like to actually speak a little bit about my mother-in-law on this topic. Anybody who's more religious than you is a fanatic, and anybody who's less religious than you is not religious. So this applies in the greater world as a whole. If you're Lubavitch, anybody who's less, if you're this, if you're that, anybody who you perceive as less is not religious, you perceive as more as a fanatic. And with the Lubavitch itself, we're coming up to Pesach, and every single home, without fail, has its unique customs when it comes to Pesach. Everyone has their unique customs. For some people, it's shmura matzah as opposed to square matzah. For some people, it's knegelach with extra eggs or less eggs. Everyone's got their own unique minhagim when it comes to Pesach. By Hasidim in particular, Hasidim were always very, very particular and very strict when it comes to Pesach to distance themselves from the slightest possibility of having chametz in any possible way. Most Hasidim, as a whole, try to distance themselves from processed foods, but there are different levels. I was brought up in a home, a Lubavitch home, and in my home we had some processed items, not processed foods, but some processed raw foods, like oil, for example. And the first Pesach that I came to my mother-in-law, I got a little bit of a shock. She was a fanatic. She didn't even have sugar. I was quite, coming to this family, the new family, a whole bunch of fanatics. Exactly a month ago, on Shabbos, I had some of my brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws over for a Shabbos meal, and I have a book called Once Upon a Chassid. And on that week's parasha, there was a story where the Rebbe Rashab had a brother-in-law who owned a sugar factory, and the Rebbe Rashab would not eat sugar on Pesach. So his brother-in-law thought that the reason why he didn't eat sugar on Pesach is because he didn't trust any companies that made the sugar. He didn't trust them. Their processes were not made correctly. He didn't trust that their process was completely free of any possibility of chametz. So what did he do? He bought new machinery, and he himself made a new sugar run just for Pesach, and he hand-delivered a box to his brother-in-law, the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe. He came to his brother-in-law and he says, I have for you here a box of sugar. And he explained to him how it was made a special run just for Pesach. Everything was very particular. And the Rebbe Rashab grew very serious. And he picked up one of the sugar cubes, he cracked it in half, and out came a kernel of wheat. So I thought my mother-in-law was a fanatic. When it came to kashrus in the home, I can tell you with an assurance, I am a little biased because I'm a son-in-law, but I can tell you with an assurance, coming from it as an outsider originally, now I'm an insider, but coming from as an outsider, that my mother-in-law took kashrus extremely seriously. She took tznius extremely seriously. And there was nothing in her home that was half-baked, both literally and figuratively. Everything that she did was 100%. We spoke before. I just want to finish off with one last point. Before I got married, there was, you hear a lot of jokes about mother-in-laws. It's always a very easy topic. So you hear these jokes and you think there's truth to every joke, right? Truth to every joke. Well, I was proved wrong again. I can tell you that for the 2 years, I knew my mother-in-law from when I got married, which was 3.5 years ago, but for the 2 years that I really got to know my mother-in-law was unfortunately at a time when she wasn't well. And no matter what the situation was at home, doing her parenting, her mothering, telling the kids to run upstairs, go to bed, screaming hin hair, the second I walked through the door, the entire world came on pause. And she didn't want me to feel uncomfortable one bit. I never had a nasty face. I never had any of these mother-in-law jokes. They're all wrong. I don't know where they got made up from. My mother-in-law was extremely sensitive. And listen, I give you all a bracha. You should have a mother-in-law like that. But it just to show you the point that she took extreme care never to ever make me feel uncomfortable. Maybe she was scared of me. But the point I'm trying to bring out is that my mother-in-law, Allah HaSholem, Sara Leah the label Allah HaSholem, was somebody not only was sensitive to her son-in-law, but was sensitive to every person who came to their home to make sure every person felt welcome, every person felt comfortable, and that everyone should walk out with a smile. Before I just forgot to thank Rabbi Yunik, I want to thank you again for your words of chizuk, and thank you for all of your help that you've given to my in-laws until now, and the help that I'm sure you'll continue. Together, we can continue to change the face of Hendon, and make the community we live in a true community of Torah and of mitzvahs, a place that would truly be ready for Mashiach.
Amen.
Aside from being an amazing mother, an amazing mother-in-law, an amazing mashpia to many people in the community, my mother-in-law was an amazing wife to my father-in-law. As I mentioned before, my father-in-law had offered to come to England, and she said she would come here for 10 years. 10 years is a long time. Not only did she follow my father-in-law to England, but to the different places in England, which obviously was divinely inspired, that they were to be in different places. They went to Manchester, they went to Oxford. It's not easy to pick up and move. But if that's what it meant that my father-in-law would be happy and successful in his job, my mother-in-law was willing to do whatever it took to make sure that my father-in-law would be happy and successful in his job and his shluchus. Everyone here in the room owes something to my in-laws. And my father-in-law and mother-in-law were an inseparable team that worked together to build not only this Chabad house, but to build a Chabad house in Oxford, to help start the Chabad house in Bloomsbury, to be the Rav and Rebbetzin in Sale, and to all the other different programs they did all over England, day in and day out. My father-in-law, the Rav of this shul, the Rav of this community, work hand in hand. It was a team. I'd like to ask my father-in-law now to share with us some words from his heart.
I think it's fair to say this is the sort of drasha I never wanted to give. Probably the most difficult one I've ever had to make. My friends, 30 days after the Petira of our Rebbetzin Sara Leah Overlander, we still stand bereft from the loss of such a great Rebbetzin, mother, wife, and it's a loss not just to her family, Chabad House, but to Klal Yisrael. We are bereft, but we are not defeated. We're still stunned by the shock of her tragic departure at such a young age. But we are not, and we dare not, be in despair. That would be the contrary to her whole life. And it would be, in fact, contrary to Judaism, Hasidism. And she was the ultimate in positivity. So, on behalf of everybody here, I say we will not let her down, and we dare not let her down for our own sakes. I'm going to start with the traditional siyum of Mishnayos that one makes on such occasions. The Mishnayos, Mishnah is the same letters as the word neshama. So I'm going to end briefly mention the end of Tractate Negoim, which loosely translated means plagues, but is referring to a very specific plagues of the biblical skin disease that some people have called leprosy, others call psoriasis. And this is a long and involved tractate involving all these different manifestations on skin, on garments, and on homes. So I'm just going to read out the last Mishnah and try and briefly explain what it is. So Mishnah Yud Gimel says, Shnei Mitzoraim shenis orvu korbanoseihem, the two people who had this skin disease, and their sacrifices, they have to bring certain sacrifices at the end of their process of purification. Their sacrifices somehow got mixed up. They got mixed up. And they don't know, each chap doesn't know whose has their own sacrifice. And one of them offers up his sacrifice, but unfortunately he passes away. He passes away after he's offered up the sacrifice. And the question is, what should the other chap do? And without getting too technical, the problem is that you can't really offer up a sacrifice in the temple if it's not your sacrifice. We can't offer up something that is, if you like, secular. We can't make it holy if there's no obligation. And it could be the fact that these chaps got their things mixed up. It could be that the one who had passed away, actually he offered up the other chap's sacrifice. And this, they said, Zushi Shalo Amshi Alexandria, that's Rabbi Yeshua. So they asked Rabbi Alexandria, they asked the people of Alexandria in Egypt, they asked Rabbi Yeshua, so he says, Rabbi Yeshua answers that how to get out of this dilemma is that the chap who is surviving is allowed to give what he should do is he get a friend, write over all his property to his friend, and he becomes a poor person. Why should he do it to a friend? Of course, the friend will hopefully give him back the money afterwards. If he is a poor person, then he is able to offer up a less inexpensive sacrifice, another sacrifice of lesser quality, and that lesser quality sacrifice, which is basically a bird sacrifice instead of an animal sacrifice, that can be offered up in a doubtful situation, whereas normally you cannot offer up a sacrifice of a doubtful situation. That concludes the Mishnah. I want to return a little bit later on to the name Metzora, which is one of the names of the Sedra, meaning somebody who's a leper. But first, I want to just, like everybody else is doing this evening, and quite rightly, tell a few stories, because people like to hear stories. I mentioned the wedding. You know, well, as you mentioned, Michael, everybody knew that she had a great sense of humor, fantastic sense of humor. And when we got married, right after the chuppah, we were walking down, for those of you who know 770, the shul, the top shul, there's a corridor leading to the back room, which is called the yichud room, the seclusion room. And we were walking down together, and she holds the kasubah in her hand. She's got the kasubah, it's quite a big kasubah. And she turns to me and she says, this is the biggest permission slip I ever had. I've got a picture of her saying that, actually. The generosity that my Rebbetzin already Mendel mentioned, but there's the 10 years. I want to share with you a letter that expresses and shows the consideration and the wisdom of the Rebbetzin. And I'm sharing this letter, it's okay because he's not here, so he won't be embarrassed. But it's somebody who he's in our community. And I'll just share this letter with you because I think it's very poignant, and it shows, I think, really encapsulates Sara Leah's amazing, unique approach. He said, he shares this, I'd like to share with you a small episode where I was and I continued to be personally inspired by her. It was in my early days at Chabad House Hendon, a year during which I was saying Kaddish for an elderly friend who had passed away with no family member to recite for him. One time after the davening, the Rebbetzin came up to me, I was a relative newcomer, thanking me and sharing that she had been very touched by my Kaddish. Indeed, she was visibly moved and was not reticent to show and express that to me. From that day on, I regarded her as a friend and an inspiration for what she had said and for how she had shared it, leaving an indelible impression that accompanies not only all my recitations of Kaddish, but all my davening and more besides. She had reminded me of the power of sincerity and of one's capacity to affect another. She comes to mind whenever I say Kaddish, or daven, or speak in public. This will remain with me always. And lastly, there are so many stories, but we have to, obviously, we can't, people will perhaps, over the days and months and weeks ahead, will tell more. But I do want to share with you, and then some of you have heard the story again at the Shiva, but for those who haven't, it is quite a remarkable expression of her determination in the face of adversity. You know, she was in hospital. This was, we're talking about now, it's the last couple of days of Hanukkah. And she was basically just fed up. And all of a sudden, she turns to me and she says, I want to go home. I'd like to go home. I've had enough. I'm leaving. So, yes dear, of course you are. Sure, yeah. No. She said, I'm going home. I want to go home. And it took me a while to realize that she was actually serious. And she stopped any cooperation with the nurses. She went on hunger strike, literally. And the nurses were going, Moshe, because if it's the worst thing you can do is to a nurse, is not to accept any of their care. And she said she wants to go home. And we're all trying to tell her, you can't, you're just not well enough, it's out of the question. And, you know, in our great self-righteous medical way. Anyway, at some point, I don't know what, we were sitting in the room and I was sending an email to somebody or whatever. And I noticed that she's going over to the cupboard and she's getting her coat. She's getting her coat. And I thought, well, this is... Anyway, so I really didn't... I felt a bit strange, really, to stop her, so, you know, and I thought, well, I'm doing this email anyway, well, I'll catch up with her. She got her coat, she walked out of the room, and she wasn't walking particularly fast at that point, at least I thought she wasn't. And after waiting to finish my email after about 2 or 3 minutes, literally 2 or 3 minutes, she had literally disappeared. She picked this up the floor. I ran after her, and I got her just before she was out the front door, literally. And I said, look, we can't, and the doctors were sort of running afterwards, and we were all sort of having to sort of usher her back, come on, this is just, it's just not on, And she was very, very strongly, she was strong, she wanted to go, and they had a bit of a time, let me tell you, we all had a bit of a time, actually bringing her back to the hall, to the ward. And at that, about an hour, half an hour later, they had actually put her in a wheelchair and brought her back up. I was actually meeting with a consultant, another consultant, a certain new consultant, a lady consultant who we were just advising. I was in a room, another room, and so one of the nurses came in and said, look, your wife, she's trying to go again, and this time she's on the wheelchair. She's out of here. And they stopped and we asked her, look, she came into the room with this consultant especially came to see her and talk, and we sat and we chatted for a bit. She kept looking at the door, when's the next escape attempt? And I just didn't know what to do, And we chatted for a little bit, and this consultant, very nice lady, Professor Amanda Ramirez is her name. She said after we were chatting for a while, and I said, she wants to go home, this, that, and the other, but of course it's out of the question, she's just not well enough, etc., etc. And suddenly this doctor, she turned to me, she said, well, look, this is not about you. This is all about her. This is not about the hospital. It's not about the doctors. This is about her. She wants to go home. And I was like, Eureka moment. Epiphany! Well, she was right. And it suddenly hit me, you know. What are we doing? We're trying to tell her she shouldn't go home. So we called the chief oncologist and we called the doctors and we said, look, is there any reason why she shouldn't actually go home? And basically they said, well, not really. She's got a little bit of a problem with potassium levels, but we could give a few pills, no problem. You know, that we could sort of do. So we ran around and we checked in and in 10 minutes we had permission to leave the hospital and to go home. And that's what she did. And it was, you know, some people called it the Great Escape. It was, put it this way, it was Hanukkah, and Friday night, this was Thursday, she came home, and she was home for us for a few days, 5 days or so, last 3 days of Hanukkah. And I was sitting by the table Friday night, with davening, and at some point, you know, it suddenly hit me, Ala Nissim. We were saying Ala Nissim, and I was thinking, you know, Rabbim ba'ad ma'atim, Giborim b'yad chalashim, you know, the many were in the hands of the few, and the mighty in the hands of the weak. And I thought, my goodness me, this is one woman against a whole hospital, a whole massive high-tech hospital with doctors and nurses, and she beat them all, including me. Baruch Hashem. And those last days of Hanukkah were so precious for the family. It was wonderful. She was there with the lighting of the menorah. Those were the last days we had. And, you know, Baruch Hashem, I listened. She always told me to listen. I always said, you know, I always had the last word. Yes, dear. And with all those stories, at the end of the day, the bottom line is, as has been mentioned here before, she was a shlucha. She was an emissary of the Rebbe. She was a great shlucha. That's what David Cohen said yesterday at the Kiddush so eloquently. He really recognized that and saw, here's a woman who is out to do the will of the Rebbe. And as far as I'm concerned, okay, I'm called a shaliach, but I have to say, if I can echo Rabbi Akiva's famous words, Kol ma shali shalachti. Whatever I have is, and this Chabad house is due to her. There's no question about that. And I think everybody here agrees there. Rabbi mentioned Zayin Adar. Today was Zayin Adar. And there's a famous sefer called Me'or Einayim from Menachem Nochem of Chernobyl. There he writes this whole discussion about Moshe. Moshe is not mentioned in this parsha. It's never mentioned in this parsha. And he says over there the reason why is because most of the years Parshas Tetzaveh comes out in Zayin Adar on this day. This is the same Sedra. So therefore, because Zayin Adar was when Moses passed away, therefore it's a hint that he's not mentioned in the Sedra. That's what Me'or Einayim says. The Rebbe, of course, he asks, well, it's true. He passed away. But why isn't it mentioned? Where's the hint to his birth in the Sedra? We only find the hint of his passing. And at the end of the day, we all know who he's talking to, like you said. It's all about Moshe. Everybody knows that Hashem is talking to Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? So why not just come out and say it? Come out and say it. The truth is, as Rabbi Yunik alluded to before, birth and death they have two different meanings. The birth of a person, when someone is born, we don't necessarily know what is going to be. And all the achievements, the future achievements they have, are actually concealed. We don't know what's going to be. It's only after a person has lived their lives in a holy and special way, then we know that that is the ultimate perfection of their birth. So therefore it doesn't make sense really to mention the birth, because there's only potential there. Whereas the fact that Moshe's whole life obviously terminated on Zayin Adar, the 7th of Adar, that was a completion of all the incredible things that he did. And that's why it's mentioned there, or that's why this hint is mentioned in Parshas Tetzaveh. And the fact that his name is not there, why is his name not mentioned? Because as we explain in Tanya, when a tzaddik passes away, people have an opportunity of connecting with the essence of that tzaddik, the essence of that righteous person, which is not limited to space or time or even a name. It's not limited to anything. One can connect to a tzaddik through the essence of that person, and that's why it says va'atot tetzaveh, as you pointed out. The essence of a person is not his name, is it? The essence of a person is much higher than a name. What do we have a name for? So I can call you by your name, I can call you by your name, you can call me by my name. It's only for you, it's not for me. I know who I am. And who I am, and who everybody is in this room, we're infinitely higher than our names. And that's why we didn't need the name of Moshe Rabbeinu even in this Sedra. Because his passing means we can connect to the essence of Moshe's soul, which is higher than a name. Perhaps it's the same thing with our Rebbetzin. Yeah. We can still feel her. We can still tap in, we can feel her essence, and we can feel that connection. That's how I feel. If I can just return to this idea of the Metzora. The Metzora, the person who has this skin disease, this leprosy. There is a sage in the Torah that is called Metzora. We all know that. Perhaps what you don't know is that this Sedra used to have a different name. Anybody know what the name used to be? Well, some people called it a different name. Some great Rishonim, early authorities, used to call it Zois Tihiyah. Zois Tihiyah. This will be the Rambam, Rashi, I think Reb Sadia Gaon in his Siddur. They didn't call it the Sedra Metzora. Why not? So the Rebbe says an amazing thing. Only the Rebbe could say this. Something is so negative as Metzora. In the old days, they didn't even want to mention it. They didn't even want to mention it. It's too negative. Leprosy, tzara, skin disease. All because why? Because people have been talking Lashon Hara, right? Slanderous gossip. That was the reason for these skin disease, right? You'll know. That was the whole purpose of the skin disease. Unfortunately, people who get themselves involved in slanderous gossip, they chat, they natter too much, and they say too much, and they say negative, bad things. And sometimes they would get this skin disease, and they would have to be separated from people. And separating from people, well, guess what? It stops you talking. It stops you talking Lashon Hara. But yet, that negativity will ultimately be positive. It will ultimately be positive, because people ultimately, as we have been promised by our sages, either in this incarnation or another incarnation, will all do tshuva, we'll all repent, we'll all, fix up what we did and regret what we did, the negative things. And we will turn those negative things into mitzvahs. Even the negative things we did, if we regret them properly, we'll turn them into zechiyas, into mitzvahs. And therefore the Metzora, we now, as we come closer to Mashiach, we are okay, we can call it by its name. Because we know that ultimately, very soon, please go with Mashiach, it will be turned into something positive. And so too, this blow that we have suffered, and we feel the pain from, and that we feel the agony from, and it's not imaginary. Somehow or other it will soon be made somehow good, somehow positive, even though perhaps we can't see it yet. But meanwhile, until that happens, we should perhaps, as the Rebbe said many, many years ago after the horrific attack in Kfar Chabad, some yeshiva students were murdered by terrorists in 1956 or something. And the Rebbe, when they asked the Rebbe, what should they do, what should we do, how do we cope with this, the Rebbe said 3 words. He answered, Hanachoma tihiyeh b'habeniyah, that the comfort will be through building. Through building. Kfar Chabad was a tiny little hick town there, and it's now an unbelievable, beautiful, big city. And I think I can say that perhaps the same thing in Chabad House. The B'niyah should continue. We have built, we'll continue to build. That will be our nechama. We want to build up Chabad House. We need to. And we want, as we mentioned yesterday in Shul, we need everybody to participate, like in the Mishkan, to make it permanent, to make the Kedusha, the holiness here, permanent, not just temporary as it was by the giving of the Torah. I'm going to close with some moving words from the Rebbetzin herself, if I can read them, that is. And she wrote these words for the Gershon Machtel concert put on a couple of years ago by my dear son-in-law of Mendel. Many of you were there, I know, well, some of you were there, and it was quite a beautiful event. There was a brochure for that event, and the Rebbe wrote, the Rebbetzin wrote, she wrote the message, which I think is what I'd like to leave you with, because it speaks to me. I hope it speaks to you. As I say, I hope I can speak. They have a certain relevance perhaps now, even though perhaps prescient. Hopefully, this will be but a short period of quiet time, of healing, till I can come once again to the Chabad House, our home away from home, to daven together to the Almighty, to hear Rabbi Katz's impeccable laning, to be with all the dear and precious people who have chosen to partake and enjoy the Rebbe's Chabad House in Hendon, which is all of ours, together, to keep rejoicing in and keep building together. Every day, really every moment, is a gift from Hashem, to be utilized for a good and godly purpose, to appreciate a simple act of breathing painlessly, of watching the sun shining on a shimmering treetop, or of watching a wasp decide my lunch is now his. Each day brings additional joy through struggle, clarity through darkness, refuah through brachas only the Rebbe can give. Greater good in my world, and surely greater good in the grand scheme of Mashiach's imminent arrival. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
All of you have come here tonight and heard words and stories about my mother-in-law. And I'm sure everyone here in this room was moved in some way or another. When one has an inspiration, if one doesn't apply it in something practical, then the inspiration comes and the inspiration goes, and next week or the week after or in a month, in 2 months, this will be another check in your calendar that you were at another event. The way every one of us can make a difference in our own personal lives, for those of you who are regulars here in the Chabad House, make a difference here in the Chabad of Hendon. And whatever community you may find yourselves in, is if you take the inspiration that you have here tonight, and it applies to every time you have an inspiration, but particularly here tonight, and apply it into something practical. Take what you heard tonight from my father-in-law, from my father-in-law's brother, my uncle, from Rebbe Yunik, from what the Rebbe spoke. Take the inspiration and apply it into something practical. Do an extra mitzvah. Take on an extra deed. Give extra tzedakah. Do something extra. Do a mitzvah behidr. Do something extra in a more beautified way. Be kind to another person. Do something extra in the memory of Rebbetzin Overlander. And I'm sure, with assurance, that if she were to be here tonight, which she is here with us tonight, but if she were to be here tonight physically, and you were to ask her, what would you want everyone to come away with tonight, is an extra mitzvah. So before everyone leaves here the room tonight, I want everyone mentally in their own mind to take on something extra, to learn a little bit extra, to daven a little bit extra, to give extra tzedakah, to do something more, to make this evening tonight a lasting memory. And the way you make it lasting is by doing a mitzvah. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight, and I'd like to thank everyone for your support by coming tonight and your continued support of Chabad of Hendon, both physically, emotionally, and materially. We should continue to be able to build the Chabad House. We've done it until now with your help, and we will continue to do it with your help. And we'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight and to make a difference in your life, in your family's lives. And let us turn the month of Simcha into a true Simcha with the Simcha of Mashiach Tzidkenu. Thank you.